Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody to our weekly series of innovations in game-based learning, and especially welcome our special guest, Kimo Oades. And Kimo, am I saying your name right? I've known you for
Yes, absolutely. Kimo Oades. That's correct.
from Azusa Pacific University, and we're really excited to hear and see your presentation today on Odyssey VR. So welcome everybody out in the audience and everybody that's viewing this in the future. I am going to turn things over to Beatrix, who's the co-host of our series, and to give you an introduction.
Moment of truth. I'm hoping it won't echo. Okay, Lisa, should I come over there, maybe? Anyway, hi, everyone. Wanted to introduce Kimo Oades, and I really apologize if I messed up your name. He's a wonderful graphic designer, instructional designer, professor, and co-author of Odyssey VR, which is an immersive exploratory environment visiting old Greece and the adventures of Homer's Odysseus. So we're going to see a lot of really exciting images and references and, the story of the Odyssey. So we're so excited to have him here, and yeah, I'll turn it over. Thanks.
All right. I'm going to start off with sharing my screen. I'm going to go to actually a website that I had built for the production of this VR. Let me share this right now with you. And what you should be seeing right now is kind of the Odyssey VR experience introduction. And I'll kind of go through this and thread my way through and show some videos. Production value. Is everybody able to see the website okay so far? My shared screen? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I'll go on. Just like with a lot of different large projects or even small projects, you usually have an original concept you start off with. And the concept of this game actually started off with some people, Lisa, Dolly especially, and Johnny Payne and myself. We were sitting outside of in a conference outside, I think it was UC Santa Barbara, sketching on a notebook about this idea of creating this Odyssey VR environment that students would be able to have this immersive experience. And they were just a few sketches that came along the way. Eventually became a full production. And let me go back here. Johnny Payne was the director of the creative writing program, and he wanted the students to be able to kind of be in this inspirational environment with strange things that are happening and exposure to different kinds of stimuli, music, and imagery. And he wrote up this little blurb. And the idea was each person who would go into the game would take on an avatar, either Odysseus or Athena. And at a certain point, all of that changed. So let me kind of talk to you through the process. We started off with ideas, and I having a graphic design background, illustration background, I was able to create some concept artwork of how we might tell the story. I was thinking more of a stage, because on a stage, I was, in my mind, thinking about certain Broadway productions that were either minimalist or in a staging, but there's a suspension of belief, and it would be a great place to kind of introduce great arts of depicting a lot of the scenes and the story of the Odyssey in a stage kind of environment that would go through. And then even we went out even designed some concept of the ceiling, the sky in that stage or in that environment, what it might be like, and Greek constellations as well. And another version of that stage, this was the Cyclops Cave. So we started off with some fancy ideas and still thinking about how do they move through this environment. If it's a stage, it's a very shallow area. some more concept artwork. You know, I drew some artwork and color it to kind of give an idea. This is Scylla and Charybdis kind of a scene, which we actually never did produce, but we went to some storyboarding phases as well in terms of what would it be like to go into the course and then actually be given directions to put on and we did design this for the Google Cardboard box.
Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you trying to stream videos right now, because we're not seeing them?
No, I'm sharing my screen.
Okay. Are you still on the Odyssey VR tour screen?
Yeah.
We think.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so your screen is frozen.
I see. Let me stop and then restart it.
Great.
And then let me try sharing again. And let me know if you're seeing the storyboard.
Now we're seeing the storyboard.
Okay. Might be just, I might be moving a little too fast or scrolling. So this is kind of a storyboard that I put together to kind of show how to get from the course into the VR environment and the kind of interactions that would happen with Hermes, the messenger god, kind of being your guide through the experience, all the way to the kind of interactions that would happen. So those were the initial ideas, and like with a lot of different productions.
Can you just share when you were building your storyboard? So we're fascinated in the whole design process. When you built the storyboard, that was done in PowerPoint, is that correct?
This was done in Photoshop and then presented in PowerPoint. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I did a lot of collaging or compositing of a lot of different images together, including some of the actual sources that Johnny had identified. And the idea here was really to be able to go into a space in this scenario to find the materials to build a boat to sail off the first island, which is the Calypso's island. So this was kind of a representation of how you would go through there, and then by being able to build the boat, you would be given a key that would allow you to go to your next adventure. So again, there were some disruptions in terms of production and the kind of support that we were getting. So we we kind of had to rethink some ideas. But let me go already to the section where things started to go bad. So I assembled a group of. We had a plan A that we were going to go with, and plan A didn't happen. Didn't get to happen. We lost some of our supporters, so we had to resort to plan B. And that plan B was me hiring former students of mine who were in the game arts program I used to chair. And together we put together some just basic notes of how we would go through this environment. We had an idea. Now we kind of just needed to do a proof of concept. And to do that, we used a sprint board using a program called Trello to really log all the different activities that we're doing with any hitches to keep everything moving along. And that worked pretty well, this production process. And let me share with you a few pictures that map of a map of the island, and there we go. And nothing really fancy of like, this is going to be the Calypso's island, and we're going to have a stage in the middle. And we started building the 3D environments, and this is a learning process for everybody in the team, really. And we kind of went through the stages of building this full 3D environment here. And adding some textures to this, atmosphere, And then we finally had a full-blown 3D environment that had these little kiosks, if you will. And to our dismay, this was too heavy, too many polygons. It really wouldn't survive in a VR environment. As a desktop product, it would be okay, but the idea again was to be able to have this, to be in an immersive environment, to have the VR experience on this. And that kind of threw us for a loop. Like, okay, what do? We can't really use these 3D assets a lot. So, we hit a stumbling block on that. And this picture that you'll see right now is a picture of the museum, or in the interior of at least one of the rooms in the museum. And while one of my teammates was trying to figure out the 3D environment, I worked with another of my teammates to build the museum. And we built the museum in a very different way. We built them out of walls instead of 3D objects that, like, not real trees, not real buildings, not real rocks, but we built them out of panels. And we found that this solution actually worked really well in terms of economy of polygon, how heavy the product was, and we tested it on a VR environment, and it seemed to work out very well. Here's another image of us working in the actual game engine. We used Unity as our game engine. We're the most familiar with, and you see where I'm on a little Skype meeting. We would Skype between 9 p.m. and 1 o'clock a.m. to do our building session, since all of us had our day jobs. But let me show you an example of that museum in a video here. Let me stop sharing my screen and play our first video so you can see that museum. And you'll see elements from the concept artwork there. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. This is the opposite side where we built this part at the very end. This kind of credits the different members of the team in artwork. Here's the credits to the different people, including Lisa. So let me pause here. So we were able to achieve great success in building the environment this way with just flat panels and artwork to decorate the walls. Everything in this museum is really very economical, including the ceiling and the tiled floor, the wallpaper, everything. What you might start seeing is that, well, where do we get all these assets? Well, every single piece of artwork, other than the ones that we borrowed from Art Academy, I had to build. So all the walls, all the floors, all the ceilings, every single prop, even these lanterns, I had to build. So luckily, I had the skills as a graphic designer, and I teach graphic design and digital imaging, so I was able to put that to use in building all of these pieces. Let me go back to sharing my screen to take you further into the journey. And so the idea that we had originally didn't work because of all the 3D assets, but we found that we were able to use a different strategy of building the environments. What I'm showing you now are kind of, these are all production kind of notes that I put online so that all the members of the team can see what's happening in each of the pieces. These were our items that they were supposed to find on that island to be able to escape, and the kind of media and text that should be viewable there. We had originally wanted to have text that was readable in the environment. We tried to create a reader inside the VR environment that was a kind of a massive fail, unfortunately. But then we found other ways. So we would hit a door would slam on us in terms of trying to get someplace, but we would take our axe and carve out a new opening on one of the walls. So this, unfortunately, this method did not work for us, but the walls did. Actually, I will show this part much later on. Well, actually, I'll show it now. So the original images I showed you of the island of Ethica transformed into walls. This is the artwork that I created to build the walls of the island. And then the ocean surrounded, and I'll show a piece of this in just a moment, of how we were able to resolve having the economy and moving through and being able to actually achieve that environment. Let me share that video with you now. So we had the base of the island, which was built in 3D, but then everything else, we worked off of the idea of a maze, kind of like Minotaur's maze, but that would be the theme for the entire production. We also included quotes from the book, and we kind of wanted to have every environment kind of have its own theme. So we wanted kind of a beach-like theme. So on Driftwood, we put the signs on here. And again, it was kind of an immersive idea of being on that island. Johnny Payne, the creative director, excuse me, the director for the creative writing program, he would pretty much give us the idea, well, I want, based on Homer's Odyssey, that this place is going to be sad and just kind of desolate and no color at all. So we took a lot of cues from what Johnny had wanted, and we added a few other things like faces of comrades that he had once had in the journey, and kind of painted each environment with a different emotion or theme. I'm going to skip a little ahead of here where you encounter Athena. And this was the last encounter you would need before you came to the reward, which is the actual assignment and that was the goal for in this exploratory environment, is in order to know what you're going to be writing about, you need to go through this experience and go all the way to the end and have that experience of being in this re-rendered idea of, in this case, Calypso's Island, to find the assignment. And this was a rinse and repeat ×3, because they had 3 assignments that were set on Calypso's Island before moving on to the next location. Okay. Let me share my screen.
There are some questions that are coming up. Do you want to take those now or wait till we're done?
No, I'll take some questions now. I haven't seen.
Okay, yeah, they show up in a separate tab called Q&A. And so one of the questions is, do you have to design games for VR differently than you would just if it were for the computer? So this is, I noticed you can use Google Cardboard as an interface, but you can also just play it on your screen. So could you address that?
Absolutely. Initially, when we're building the game, we're building it very high res, actually, meant for the computer. It's really the game engine that will need some scripting and that will allow you to export to a mobile device. And it will take all the content. And this is where my programmers came in to be able to actually process this information through the game engine, through the scripting, so that it would output. And actually, our goal was to output to both Android and iOS Apple standards. What we found that there were a lot of standards that Apple had that really was not either feasible or practical for this project. And that was the main way to be able to distribute the VR content was through the App Store. There is another alternative, but again, it was going through a lot of different hoops. So we just really limited our designing for the Android phone, and we found a lot of success, a lot of ease designing for that. And again, with more resources, more money, including money to pay for the Apple process, we probably would have been able to do that as well.
Okay, and I guess one question I had, or one comment, when I went in the simulation myself, I found that there were a lot of interactive activities I had to do, things I actually had to do while I was in the space, not just walking through the space. Could you talk a little bit about how you decided, like when I had to collect the 3 ropes to get the sheep, that little kind of interaction, how you decided on those pieces to encourage engagement in the sim? Okay,
so one advantage that I had was I was working with among my favorite and best students, and they were gamers, not just by profession, but also in real life, they're gamers. So we started discussing for each of the assignments, how would they navigate through a space and what's the motivation? And so we built the environments, including the environment, we built what are the different pieces, what's the gameplay here? So one thing that's very common in games like World of Warcraft, for example, is you need to collect things. So for example, for the first entrance into the Cave of the Cyclops, you actually had to just find, actually it's a great way that we designed this. You just had to find the end, which meant you just had to navigate through this and get lost and find the very end where the actual assignment was. And then the next time you enter, then we started placing props. In this case, it would be this giant mug of wine, this wooden poker, sharpened wooden poker, and fire. So you had to collect these things in order to blind the Cyclops, because in the story, the Cyclops kept Odysseus and his comrades in the cave and would eat the men one by one. And so the idea is we need to escape. And we use this eye as a representation of the Cyclops, a big giant shield. We need to be able to drug him with the wine, and then poke, heat the giant wooden poker in the fire. And when he's asleep from the wine, we had the target kind of superimpose the target rings on the eye, and then actually piercing the eye. So that was stage 2. It's just blinding the Cyclops. And then stage 3 was finding rope. And there were 3 different parts of the cave, and we would always change the location. So we really tried to stay as true to the story as we could in terms of sequence and how they escaped. So the men were able to escape by tying themselves to the sheep that were also in the cave. And the interesting thing is, before we did Circe's Island, our first actual space that we built besides the museum was the cave. And we really were quite surprised how kind of claustrophobic it was. Besides building the graphics on here, I experimented a lot with the sound design and a lot of layering of different recorded sounds from caves as well. And we pretty much listed, okay, part 1, what are the interactives here? What's happening? What are the triggers? So we actually wrote it out, and this is why we had this website, is to be able to kind of communicate what's going to happen here. So when they're in the cave, you approach the table, and actually I will show that video just so you can kind of see. That should be number 2. So you're inside the cave now, and there's the entrance that you can see. And every location starts off with directions. And you've been exploring, there's kind of the Cyclops hovering in the shadows. And all really you have to do is to look for the assignments. And then the alarms, sheep falling, so we added some really kind of scary, loud, upsetting sounds like those sirens to really jolt the user. So if you had headphones on and it's not comfortable and you need to navigate, it stops after 6 seconds or so, but you have to just navigate through this space to find the end. And then you get the first assignment, and then rinse and repeat. A different prompt, look for the different items that are indicated until you finish the whole Cyclops experience.
It's funny because when I was going through the simulation, I didn't realize it was the same cave. I didn't realize the reuse on it. Isn't that funny?
That's fantastic.
That's how slow I am. And I was sharing with the class before we got into webinar how when I experienced it, because of the sound design, I did feel tension while in the space. I got a little nervous going around the corner in the cave. There was one point that felt like something was going to happen to me because of the music. So you did a really amazing job with the sound engineering.
And I've worked with sound before, but not like this. I mean, in a much more simple way, in straight on videos. But this is really fun. And again, the way I was layering sound was how I would layer an image. I'm more of a visual person, so it was really. And the tools that we use for the sound was really just. I'm blanking out on the name now. It starts with A.
Audacity.
Audacity is very simple, and it's free. And it was such a simple way of really being able to adjust and layer sound and really have a lot of fun.
We
And then
we do have a few more questions if you're open to those.
yes,
Enrique asked,
yes.
once the game was built, did you export it as an app to be uploaded and run on a device, or was it hosted somewhere so it could be accessed through a browser or mobile device? You've talked about that a little bit, but there are questions about where is the game?
So for the students, we actually provided a link in the course shell where they could actually download not just the VR, but also the desktop version. So we provided two versions, and that's for several reasons. One is not everybody has an Android phone or can borrow one to download the game into. Another is not everyone's going to be comfortable in that headset. You can actually get a little nauseous in some cases as you move through the space. And we wanted to have an alternative, which is the desktop version. And the nice thing about the way we produced it is we built for a desktop version already, and with the intention of having a mobile app. So it was fortunate that we could deliver both, but we didn't have it in a particular store, not yet. Really, it's just an alpha version that we have right now. I'll answer one more question and then I'll move on to the next part.
Okay, Andy asked, what age group or grade level is this for, or is it for a general audience? So I guess the scope of the audience.
This was specifically for a class. This was a master's in creative writing program, and the students taking this class, it's actually a long poem course, and they're using the Odyssey as an example of that long poem and kind of using the space as inspiration as they write the different parts of their long poem, not necessarily connected with the Odyssey, but certainly kind of to experience kind of a rendition of a long poem in a VR environment. So we're talking probably students who are 25 years and above, both male and female. They were, and the class was offered as a purely online course. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you.
I'm just going to go very quickly through some other environments here.
Okay.
The next we created was Circe's Menagerie. And so from the dark caves of the Cyclops, we wanted to change the mood, and we described very similar, the gameplay was very similar. They had to find different items. Part one here, they had to find, I think we changed this actually to water, to locating water, and then to find the assignments. The next is to find magical herb, Molly, that Hermes in the story said would make him or cure him or make him immune to Circe's magic. And the last part is for Odysseus to save his men. They've now all been enchanted as pigs. They're pigs now, and he has to save them. I'm actually going to show this video because this was actually really fun to do, because you did have to search for the pigs, but the transformation was kind of interesting. So let me play this, very short. This is from the museum and entering one of the portals. very serene music and birds chirping and a lush vegetation and trees. And again, everything is based on a maze. And that's the transformation from pig to human. And like even crafting the human, this is a Frankenstein of different body parts and hair and beards and things like that. So we had to build all those different things. And then I'll just skim through. The Underworld. I won't show the Underworld. It's a really unpleasant place to be. And we wanted to be, we were maybe too ambitious. I had the idea, we're kind of crossing beams here, but the Underworld and Hades, we could kind of maybe think about intersecting that with Dante's Inferno and the 9 rings of hell. So we started, we would put inspiration images here, Dante's Inferno, a graphic idea of what's happening there, other artist work, photographs that kind of would help us visualize what it might look like. And we designed the different, all 9 rings of hell. So from Limbo to the Ring of Lust, for gluttons, for the greedy, wrathful. And we actually thought the wrathful was kind of interesting from working with photographs of ocean waves, ended up looking like raw meat, which, we thought, well, that'd be interesting. And then the heretics, with some flames and more flames in for those who sinned, were violent, fraudulent, and the last one was for the treacherous, very icy and cold. And this was a lot of work because we could have just gone on with just 1 ring and then just built, but we had to build all 9 rings. And it's and the sound effects, it's a lot of moaning, groaning, and screaming, and people in agony and pain, and you have to just go through the rings to find the assignment. Tiresias is the prophet, the ghost of Tiresias. The prophet was who you were trying to follow and speak to get information and find the assignments. So
I think your screen share got. In Kimo.
Okay, let me reshare that. Okay, so I won't show any videos for the 9 rings of hell, although there are. We have clips here. And from there, we moved on to something that actually broke the mold in here because we had to do the Sirens. It was something that one of the first ideas that Professor Johnny Payne had wanted to include, and it's really about Odysseus tied to the mast of a ship as it's going through the Sirens luring the men to their death. But the men were deaf because they plugged their ears with wax. So how are we going to make a maze out of this? So we really had, I split my team of 2. So each one did separate things, and I worked on this with one of my teammates to build it. And here's some inspiration pictures that we had. Let me, some Dutch paintings, especially. I really love the Dutch paintings that showed such atmosphere and violence in the waves. And then I tested, what are the sirens going to sound like? So I actually had I inherited a very old collection of records, of LPs that were from the 40s and 50s, European records of opera singers. Specifically, I had a collection of Maria Callas, who happens to also be Greek. So I thought, wow, this is perfect. So I actually was able to get the copyrights to work to use her voice, but we layered it in a way to make it very siren-like. So let me play that video for you, and you'll see kind of that journey trying to. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the hell video. I don't want to show that. I mean, I'd like to, just don't have enough time. Here is the Sirens. We actually use a 3D ship, Greek ship for this, but we build the rest of the environment. So they had to listen to 3 different aria excerpts. And I used saw blades as kind of symbolizing the treacherous waters and the elf-like looking sirens. And I'll stop here. Once all 3 songs were played, each of these lanterns would turn on one by one as the songs were played. The final assignment would actually appear on this ghost of part of the parchment. And as far as the songs and how I chose them, I actually selected very specifically siren songs, kind of like this what it puts here. As far as the music, the kind that you want to be listening to as you die of a self-inflicted stab wound. Just kind of this kind of awful, kind of, but beautiful at the same time kind of feeling. I picked arias that had tragedy, that had seduction, that had kind of an overwhelming sense of destruction, but in a kind of beautiful way, the way the Sirens sang it. So that's kind of my approach in dealing with the Sirens. And the final part that I'd like to share in here is Ethica, coming home. And we had one idea of how we wanted to handle Ethica, but we wanted to be, hey, you're home, happiness, everything is going to be all right now. But Johnny was insistent, oh no, it's not a happy ending yet. He wanted things to be a little dark. And so I don't have a lot of, we had ideas that we wanted to do in terms of ideas for the palace. How are we going to build this? How are we going to move through this? Well, we actually ended up being able to find a model of a temple that we ended up using. And I wanted it to kind of have a Maxwell Parrish kind of a feeling to it too. We didn't achieve that look. I'll actually show you what we ended up with in the video. And there's styles that happen here also. And as I'll tell you a little bit about it here. Every module had a theme of how the message and the quotes are. In this last piece, Coming Home, I used for sale signs, home for sale signs, realtor signs. So in the first one, you had open house signs that had the quotes in them. And then until you get to this last part where it's sold, the house is sold. So that's kind of the theme. Something I want to share with you here, when we first built this is one of the last pieces. This is the last piece we built. I was very unhappy because I was telling my teams, like, no, this looks like Minecraft. This is not supposed to look like Minecraft. And, we really played with atmosphere and sky to make it look a little bit more somber and a little dark. And here it is. This is the last leg of the journey. So there's going to be some killing in here, killing and maiming, as in the story. And here's the palace, and there are his bow and arrows. You'll need to pick that up. I think that's all I had for you there. So, you had two more suitors to destroy there. So this is the last piece that kind of capped the Odyssey journey. I can take some questions now if anybody has any more questions.
Yeah, we had a few questions that we still need answered. You talked about some of the things that were challenges for you. Kaylee asked, what was your favorite part of the game to design and work on?
Oh boy. There was a lot of illustrating on here, wall after wall after wall. By the time we hit Ethica, I really just had to build one wall because it was the shrubbery. You have to go through a shrubbery maze first to get there. So I just built one panel and we wrapped it around, panels. But I really had a lot of fun illustrating. The hardest part and the most challenging part in the creating of the art was, of course, trying to find artwork that we either had purchased or had licensed to use That's always very difficult. So if we couldn't, I would have to illustrate them. Now is probably the most challenging part. Strategizing, like how are we going to have the suitors killed? How are we going to teach, for example, the user how to pick up and shoot? So the unit before this one actually teaches them how to pick up a bow and how to aim and fire. So it prepares them for this finale. So we definitely would think in terms of what would the learner need or the user need to be able to what skills would they need to build in order to apply to more difficult skills.
Okay. Kimo, we need to start wrapping up because we have a class coming in the room in 10 minutes. So
yes.
I'm going to ask you one more question. We'll take a couple minutes and then wrap it up. Maddie wanted to know if you developed any kind of a leaderboard, or was there any type of tracking in the game? So as students went through, they could track their completions.
No. Those were all built in the original idea. But again, based on the resources and economy and time, we were not able to create the saves and the feedback and the leaderboard. But they were part of the original design. Unfortunately, we were not able to realize it. Just to kind of give you guys a time frame of how it took us like 2.5 months to build the original island that failed, and then about 4.5 months to build the actual game as I presented it to you. Not a lot of time. I think I put in way too many hours, volunteered hours, at least 700 additional hours, volunteer hours, in putting this together. I would say if you were to budget to do something like this and you knew what you were doing, it's going to take about 1,500 hours of production time to do, 6 months if you knew exactly what you were doing, working around the clock. I was putting in about 16-hour days to, working and then working on this.
I really appreciate you sharing your perspective from a designer perspective, because we don't often hear about the failures, all the hours that go into it. You did it outside your regular job, a lot of it. It's really powerful for you to be so transparent and open about that. And I thank you so much for sharing that perspective. We do need to wrap up. We have students waiting to walk in the classroom. I want to thank you so much. It's so good to see your face and to see the full scope of what went into the design of the game. I was only there at the beginning stages, and to see how it all played out is really rewarding, that you were able to take it that far.
Yes, I'm adding the link to the website that'll have all the clips and kind of the production images and guidelines if anybody else wants to take a gander at that.
Oh, thank you so much. And if people want to get in touch with you, do you mind sharing your email in the chat? And that way it'll be there for people who watch the recording as well.
I'm available at LinkedIn, but so you can send me an invite to
Kimo Oades at LinkedIn.
I think my email there is, I still use my personal one, but it's Mr. Kimo, I'll put it in there, at me.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just let me know that you're in part of the webinar, and I'll be more than happy to share
great.
Any information. Yeah. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much. We will be putting this recording on YouTube tomorrow, and we'll be forwarding you a link, and just really appreciate your time and love seeing you again.
All right. We'll talk soon.
All right. Yes. Thank you so much. And bye, everybody online. Appreciate you being here.
Bye, everybody.
Stop the recording and we're off.